Excuse me. What is your name?
Hello, my name is Ashraf. Hi, my name is Abdullah.
Fatiha. Hi, my name is Naurizana.
Hi, I am Fatima Afika.
Hi, my name is Hilda Soraya.
Hi, my name is Farah Zakalisa.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Irina.
After the independence during the reign of Tun Abdul Razak as Prime Minister, Malaysia was the first country to introduce NEP by the government in 1970 in response to the consequences of colonization. The government had to restructure a new policy which is NEP, and the NEP was introduced after a period of ethnic tension and unrest and was designed to address the economic disparities between the Malay majority and the Chinese and Indian minority communities. The problem has clearly persisted, particularly since the country's independence in 1969, when the government believed that a failure to take immediate action towards the country's problem might lead to the country's demise. The majority of problems that are noticeable after independence are poverty, ethnic racism, economic growth, and equity ownership. The package of the new economic policy basically has two main components with the objective to eradicate poverty and to restructure society with the hope that the policy is going to prevent the problem from completely disappearing and from getting even worse. The affirmative action component of the NEP involved measures such as the establishment of quotas for university admissions and government jobs for Malays, the creation of a Bumi Putra ownership policy to encourage Malays to acquire shares in a company, and the implementation of the preferential treatment for Bumi Putra-owned companies in government contracts. The NEP was originally intended to last for 20 years, but was extended in 1991 with the introduction of the National Development Policy, which continued many of the NEP's affirmative action policies. The NDP also introduced a new emphasis on rural development and poverty reduction, and expanded the NEP's focus beyond the Malay community to include other indigenous groups such as the Orang Asli. The NDP focused on improving infrastructure, increasing investment, and promoting the development of the private sector. It also aimed to increase the participation of Malays in the economy by promoting entrepreneurship and providing access to education and training. In 2010, the government introduced the new economic model, which is NEM, which aimed to shift the focus of economic policy away from the affirmative action and towards a more market-oriented approach. However, the NEM has faced significant resistance from some quarters and progress towards its implementation has been slow. In 2001, the NEP was revived as the National Vision Policy, which had a similar objective as the NEP but with a greater emphasis on promoting the social cohesion and national unity. The NVP aimed to balance the interests of all ethnic groups in Malaysia and reduce the disparities between them.
The new economic policy (NEP) was implemented in 1971 to address the problem of poverty, ethnic racism, economic growth, and equity ownership. According to Yong Pei Jung, the rate of poverty in 1970 was over 49%, with Malays being the majority of the poor. In 1970, the overall prevalence of poverty was 49.3%, with poverty more prevalent in rural areas by 58.7% than in urban areas, which is 21.3%. Poverty was more prevalent among Malays and other indigenous communities known as Bumiputra, accounting for 64.8% compared to 26% for Chinese and 39.2% for Indians. The second policy problem is about ethnic racism. Malaysia's division was filled by three major divisions, each with significant roots in history. The main divide is ethnic, with Malays accounting for 50.8% of the total population. Other communities such as Chinese and Indian Malaysians have not had equal rights and status. This third split did not arise until 1969, when the ruling party lost its majority of 2/3 in parliament, sparking racial rioting and a year of emergency rule. The third policy problem is about economic growth. Malaysia had a major economic imbalance before the 1970s due to income distribution, job opportunities, and ownership and management of economic activities. Malaysia followed a development strategy to stabilize export revenues and income, and the government implemented a diversification policy to boost other economic pursuits. Lastly, the problem of equity ownership. The 1960 census revealed that Malaysia owned only 2.4 million acres of land, which was 5.5% of the total land area. The distribution of land ownership was seen as a major obstacle to the economic empowerment of the Malaysia community, and was one of the key issues the NEP sought to address.
Moving on to the objective of NEP, where the first objective is to restructure the society. The objective focuses on the strategy to increase the access to land using the land reformation concept through the role played by FECRA and RISDA, by advancing states and areas that are considered backward through the development of new regions such as Dara, Kesedar, and so on. According to the Minister of Economy in 2001, the government has improved the productivity of the rubber industry, diversified into oil palm, and expanded rice and livestock production. Next, by permitting them to share more equitably in the benefits of economic growth by distributing economic equity ratio to 30% for Bumiputras, 40% for non-Bumiputras, and 30% for the foreigners. The second objective highlights the point to reduce and eradicate poverty regardless of their races. The initiative made by the government is by increasing job opportunities to the society regardless of their races. The aspect of human resources with priority to the development of skilled personnel through training programs have been emphasized. Increasing productivity and income level through the privatization program and through the government's export oriented by policy, having an open economy with low tariff and providing incentive for exports help to attain economic growth. Next, they focus on modernizing the rural area through the implementation of the Integrated Rural Strategy (IRD) by establishing several organizations such as Kesedar, Ketengah, Dara, and Kejora. Lastly, the government focuses on improving the standard and quality of life in society through education by improving the access to education to all ethnic groups, both in urban and rural areas. For example, increasing the number of schooling and training institutions such as MRSM, vocational and technical school. The establishment of a full boarding secondary science school provides the opportunities for people from rural areas to further their studies in the science field.
I will continue our presentation on policy evaluation. So the first one, we will look at evaluation of poverty. So by year 2000, only 8% of Malaysians were living in poverty, which is declined from 50% in 1970. So this is a result of the government initiative that supply innovative resources, infrastructure, technologies, and also support service to the traditional common people in rural areas, so they could enhance their output and also income. So between 1970 and 1984, Peninsular Malaysia's poverty rate considerably declined, falling from 49.3% to 18.4%. So with the exception of smallholder coconut farmers, poverty rates declined for all important target populations, and the gap between rural and urban poverty has narrowed. So the second one, we look at the evaluation on ethnic racism problem. So the new economic policy gave the native Malay citizens preferential rights. So by 1990, new development in Malaysia was discounted by 5 to 15%, and Bumiputra should have owned 30% of business equity. So despite debate over its impact, some claim that these policies have helped the growing middle class of the Malay ethnic group. But racial segregation in public school is everywhere, and it affects Chinese, Indian, and also the indigenous people in different ways. So Malay individuals enjoy an unusual number of public sector jobs and housing market advantages thanks to affirmative action regulations, while non-Malay political groups face discrimination due to the restriction of free speech. So the effectiveness of the NEP, which has been in place for more than 40 years in combating racial discrimination, has come into question. Next, we look at evaluation on economic growth problem. So Malaysia's living standard and social stability both got better in 1980s because of its high growth rate that kept going. By the end of the decade, the country's economy had become more diverse, its financial sector had been deregulated and liberalized, and it had become a developing market with a middle income level. In the years after the Asian financial crisis, Malaysia's economy had one of the strongest rebounds. This was due to the growing global demand for electronics and loose monetary policy. Investor trust was boosted by the fast growth of the culture economy and gradual loosening of restriction on capital, and this made the financial system less vulnerable. And the last one, we look at evaluation on equity ownership problem, which is in the NEP, efforts were made to increase the equity ownership of the Malays in the economy. So data show that the share capital of equity ownership had by Bumiputra, Malay also other indigenous group, increased from 2.4% in 1970 to 19.2% in 1990. So the NEP in Malaysia has been criticized for creating a culture of dependence on government assistance, but there is evidence to suggest that it has been successful in increasing Bumiputra equity ownership and reducing economic disparities. However, the NAP's focus on race-based policy has led to a reliance on quotas and subsidies, resulting in inefficiencies and market distortions that have hindered economic growth and development.
Now, I will present about the policy recommendations. Firstly, is to abolish the 30% of Bumiputra share ownership. The government got rid of the 30% Bumiputra equity participation requirement for public listed companies, PLCs, but kept a macro target of 30% for the community as part of a big effort to get rid of restrictive rules from the 1971 new economic policy. Companies that want to be listed must meet FIC's standards and give Bumiputra owners 50% of the public shareholding split. This is meant to make Malaysian businesses more competitive and attract FDI. Secondly, is to empower the Bumiputra wealth ownership. The NEP's goal is to increase Bumiputra equity ownership. This is difficult due to limited access to money. To address this, policies and programs should be put in place to improve knowledge and skills, such as more formalized industry insertion and entrepreneur development programs. Institutions like IKM and Giat Mara should be upgraded to teach more in-depth skills and investments should be made to get more shares of the company. Equinas will continue to fund businesses that are growing quickly and invest 10 billion ringgit Malaysia to double the number of shares owned by Bumiputra, a Malaysian ethnic group. PHB's AHB fund will be used to buy industrial properties and mixed-use developments in important urban areas.
Next, we have come to the conclusion of the presentation. So it's true that the NEP has made the Malay's population economic situation better, but it has also been criticized for not working well and raising fear that it has made racial issues worse in the country. In light of this problem, it might be best to maintain the NEP with some modification. And some changes that could be made, including making the policy more accountable and clear, as well as making sure that resources go to those who really need them and not just to a select few. Our recommendation is to proceed with the policy, but with the necessary adjustments that are needed to reach all of the goals. To keep the plan from making racial division worse, effort will also be made to bring different ethnic groups together and help them understand each other better. Now, no matter how long the policy can be in place, it won't be enough in order to solve the main problem that led to the NEP in the first place. Progress must be made every day and every year.